difference we make defines the work we do. Every time we energize our cities, fulfill the dreams of the many, forge genuine partnerships, connect ideas, design experiences, and solve our toughest challenges. We drive change for a better world. By staying rooted in our values and understanding the community's needs, we are able to create an impact that is felt beyond borders. A change that transcends generations. A legacy that will stand the test of time. And as we conquer new horizons, we look back to where it all started. From a small town in the Visayas, to our journey to become global, we will remain at the helm. Our next century defined by how we break conventions, rethink the usual, and push the boundaries of possibility. Because our business is your story of firm foundations, purposeful growth, and the future that we share. Aboitiz, 100 years of advancing business and communities. Year after year, one thing has remained constant. Our goal to ensure meaningful economic development and uplift the lives of the people we serve. Amid the changes, we continue what we've set out to do. We believe in an enterprise that reflects our culture, our values, our core. We take inspiration from our past. And usher in a new era of progress. Our balanced pursuit for financial gains and sustainability reflects our rich history and our fruitful journey. And shows our commitment to the country's future. The difference we make defines the work we do. Every time we energize our cities, fulfill the dreams of the many, forge genuine partnerships, connect ideas, design experiences, and solve our toughest challenges. We drive change for a better world. By staying rooted in our values and understanding the community's needs, we are able to create an impact that is felt beyond borders. A change that transcends generations. A legacy that will stand the test of time. And as we conquer new horizons, we look back to where it all started. From a small town in the Visayas, to our journey to become global, we will remain at the helm. Our next century defined by how we break conventions, rethink the usual, and push the boundaries of possibility. Because our business is your story of firm foundations, purposeful growth, and the future that we share. Aboitiz, 100 years of advancing business and communities.
Hi and hello, good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to our first external run of the Massive Transformative Purpose, hosted by Trilliers, the Aboitiz Group, and in partnership with our Aboitiz Academy. So before we start, I would like to introduce myself. So my name is Isaac Galang. I'm part of the AEB Transformation team, and I will be your moderator this afternoon. Once again, thank you so much. Maraming salamat po for spending your Monday afternoon with us. And we assure you that this session will give you a lot of learning and will make you realize your North Star as we go along with your career, with your life, and to everything else that you can use your transformative purpose. I just want to give a huge shout out to the 47 strong people and counting that are watching here in our Zoom webinar. And by the way, we are also being we are also streaming live. Sorry about that. We're also streaming live via YouTube. So please feel free to send a link if in case that you still have friends and connections that you want to invite for them to also experience this massive transformative purpose with us this afternoon. And by the way, before we formally start, I just wanted to also inform everyone that this session is being recorded so we can share the recording with you afterwards. And after this session, we will be also allotting time for question and answer so we can clarify all the things that needs clarification that will help you build your massive transformative purpose. So without further ado, because this is a very, very informative session and we don't want to waste any time. Good afternoon, everyone, to those who are chatting. Good afternoon as well. So without further ado, I would like to turn over the virtual floor to our AED Chief Transformation Officer, our speaker this afternoon. Please welcome Ms. Emily Smith. Good afternoon, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Isaac, and thank you so much to the people who have joined here today. I would love to know where you are in the world, in the country, so please put into the chat where you're calling in from. So this is really about a massive transformative purpose and one that's specifically for you. And so why? So the first thing is that the most common thing between the fastest growing companies in the world is actually to have a very defined purpose. We call that a massive transformative purpose. And usually that's really around how can we do something extraordinary together? How can we maybe reach one of the UN sustainability goals? And so it's really about what's important to us. What do we want to do that's so important? And how can we change the world? And in fact, having a massive transformative purpose that I'll now call an MTP can be for anyone. It can be for an individual person, a team, a project, a whole company, a country. And so it's really up to you where you use this. And I really encourage you to try and roll this out with all sorts of people around you. Maybe it's even your family, maybe it's your circle of friends, to have that shared purpose of what's important. And so if you have defined it and the others around you have, it leads to really beautiful discussions. It leads to more than the usual chit chat and actually doing something really lovely together. So I often define it in this way, or I really change the question to, how do you want to improve the lives of maybe even millions of people? Maybe you just want to transform the lives of 50 people around you. But often you find that once you actually start to do something, you can actually have an impact that might be in the millions of people. And wouldn't that be extraordinary? It's actually not so hard. We've just got to decide to do that. And so if we go back to companies, what are some of the massive transformative purposes that I really like? So usually you want to have really thought about what that purpose would be. It will have lots of details, but then you distill it down to one single sentence, one phrase. So Google's is definitely my favorite, which is organize the world's information. And if you think about it, if you ask someone on the street and say, hey, do you think it would be useful to organize the world's information? They would probably say, oh yeah, what a fantastic goal and task. And Google actually lives this every day. I actually got to meet with the Chief Transformation Officer, who actually shares an office with the founders. And they were saying at the time, hey, we're going to map the ocean floor because the world does not have information on that yet. And we need to organize that as well. So everything is driven by this one purpose of organizing the world's information. And then I love lots of the other ones, Spotify, unlock the potential of human creativity. Or what about if you're a group that was just trying to help people who are addicted to drugs? A world free of addiction. It's so simple, it's so clear, and what a fantastic approach. So you want that phrase, but also the meaning behind it to be really audacious, aspirational, something that really stirs your soul. It says exactly who you are at the core, what's important to you. But you also want it to be so clear that when you say it, it's like, oh, yeah, I've got that. But also that you can tell it to anyone else and they'll understand. So you want something that is, not too detailed, something that's fairly concise, but also something that's not so wishy-washy that it's like some motherhood statement of, I want to improve the world. You need something that is a bit more specific in there so that people can hopefully listen and go, that's cool. How do I get involved in that? So it's also something that you can use, whether it's you or the company that has the MTP, it's really a way to choose different directions. So as a CEO of my previous company, people would ask some really difficult questions and I would think, which one meets our MTP? And as soon as I said to anyone, this particular path meets our MTP better, there would never be another conversation around it. People would go, oh, you're right. So the politics just disappears immediately. And so if you use this as your North Star of where you're trying to get to, it really helps to both make the decision, but also to get buy-in from others. You also want to use this as a magnet to attract the kind of people that also want to achieve the same sort of goals. And so whether they're a few people across the world because it's quite a specific kind of idea, or whether it's an entire movement that will be within your own community, it's a way to really get to the heart of who else actually has the same sort of ideas. You talk with those people on a different level of a soulful level when you actually have made that definition for yourself. So let's move on to how you actually go about defining this for yourself. So first of all, we know the world can feel really chaotic and crazy at times. We're always sort of putting out fires, metaphorically, in our business. There's always distractions. We're always juggling family and friends and doing fun things and work, which hopefully is also really fun. But, you know, where do we actually get the time to de-stress and to actually think about what's important? And so I ask you, as we're going through this, to really think about your breathing, to think about how you just center yourself, to really be able to think deeply about what's important. Maybe you want to start breathing slowly in and out to get ready for this. And that's just calming all the other stuff in our brain so that our frontal lobe, which is the really creative thinking and emotion, can actually start to really work. And we want to be thinking about these things so that we actually don't take the wrong path, so that our time that we spend is worthwhile, so that we don't sort of waste time doing things that are meaningless. So it doesn't make sense to go faster if you're going in the wrong direction. And it certainly doesn't make sense to work harder if you're working on the wrong thing. And speed and diligence are only virtues if you have a clear and worthy goal. That's why we have MTPs. It's to make sure that our life is meaningful, that we actually did something that was useful, that when we look back from our deathbeds, we say, that was worth it. So the other point is, have you ever actually given yourself permission to change the world? Most people haven't. Most people sort of think that it's that person over there that does it, that person who is born to it. And that's not the case. It's actually people who just decide to step up and do something wonderful. So as we think about giving ourselves permission to do something audacious and have a big goal, I want to share with you my story, which is, this is my dad. I love my dad. And when he was quite young, he's a doctor, but he also did a doctorate. And he actually changed the world. So he was the first person to realize that if you have carbon monoxide exposure, then it's not just what they thought, which was that you're either completely okay or you die. It's actually that you can get brain damage from carbon monoxide poisoning. He realized it was a poison even in the non-lethal form. And that might sound small, but it's actually why, for instance, firefighters take air into fires, because they don't want to get brain damage. And in fact, just as my father was delivering his thesis, my grandparents had gone over to where he was studying in the UK from Australia, where I'm from. And my grandfather managed to burn the toast and set the kitchen on fire. And so he was raced to hospital. My father grabbed his thesis, raced to the hospital as well, and handed over his thesis to the doctor and said, please give him oxygen right now, or he's going to get brain damage. And this is the reason. And the doctor said, oh, wow, absolutely. And so my grandfather was the first person whose life was changed by my father. But he changed all these other lives for the better as well. And growing up, I just thought this was normal. In fact, he's changed the world in other ways as well. And it wasn't until later in life that I realized a lot of people have never met someone like that. And I truly tell you, it's the people around us. It's just the people around us who decide to step up and do something wonderful. So what is it that we're actually trying to achieve? So I want to now take you through a set of questions. And I want to take you through this in both negative and positive framing. And I think you'll see why it's important to have both. So let's start with the negative phrasing, and hopefully you have some pen and paper, or you could obviously write on whatever form of computing you're using, but really think deeply, I hope, about what this means to you. So what's a problem in the world that really bothers you? So let's spend about 3 minutes, write down whatever comes to you, and then we'll move on. And then if you're ready, let's move on to the second question, which is, what do you hate existing in the world? What do you think there should be none of? What do you want to fix? And even though this might seem like a very similar question to the first one, actually answering it in different ways will really help you find different angles and different things that matter to you. So what do you hate existing in the world? Now, if you're starting to think, gee, I've got a long list here of things, you might want to start to narrow down and say what's the most important to you. You might also want to start to add more detail. So, for instance, if you said hunger, you might want to start to narrow down and say, I really hate that 42% of the produce grown in the Philippines goes bad before it gets to the market, and I want to solve that part of it. Or anything else. So try and be as specific as you possibly can. So third question, and again, we'll spend about 3 minutes. So what do you feel is a great injustice in the world? Again, a similar kind of question, but it's being asked in a different way, and you might think of something that's different. But also, if you start to see a pattern between what you've named in the first 3, that can be very helpful. But just make sure that you've covered everything. So what do you feel is a great injustice in the world? Now, the next question to move on to is a hypothetical. In fact, one that's highly unlikely to ever come true, but one that actually can help us decide whether we really feel strongly or not about any of these issues or any other new issues. So hypothetical, you've got 1 hour to live, and you can either spend it with family and your loved ones, or It just so happens that you could make extraordinary progress on solving a major problem for humanity in that hour. Is there something that's so important to you that you would actually spend that time solving the problem rather than spending it with your family and loved ones? Is there something so important that if you could make that huge progress, you would actually spend it with your family, with fixing the problem? Before we move off the negative phrasing, I want to talk a little bit about the big things and the small things. If we're talking about a life well lived because we've achieved these big things, we also need to think about the things that make us happy and the small things, those little moments in life that just make us smile, but feel deeply good. And so let's start by, we need to often think about what makes us feel like we really could have done something differently, a regret. So think of the one person in your life that you now have a negative relationship with or a non-relationship with, that if you just said, it was my fault, let's either get over it and clear the air or reestablish the relationship, who would that be and why? This is only for yourself. If you could just fix one relationship that had gone sour, what would that be? How would you feel if you had cured that relationship? What would it mean to you? We've had so many people who've gone through this MTP program and defined one thing and just gone and said sorry. It's just my fault. Let's just decide not to decide whose fault it was, but you're important to me. And how many relationships have been fixed by that one little act, and people who years later say, thank you for just putting into perspective why that was important. And so maybe you do want to act on whatever you just thought of and wrote down. Maybe you don't. It's up to you. And as we start to think about moving into the positive, just think a little bit about those little moments in life that make you sing inside. Those moments where you have that elation. Maybe it will be something quite small. Maybe it's looking at a family member. Maybe it's nature. Maybe whatever it is. Maybe it's a win at work. It doesn't matter. Write down a couple of those things that really, really impact you. Those little moments. And I hope by this stage you're starting to feel centered. I hope that you're thinking about your breathing. I hope that you're really thinking about what truly matters to you. And as we do that, I want to ask you, what do you really care about and why? What do you really care about? So describe as much as you can about why you care about those things. Most of us decide never to even attempt things because we just presume they won't work. We presume that we'll be wasting our time. In fact, we often end up wasting time in the mundane instead of actually trying. And so, of course, there are always bottlenecks and challenges in real life, but it's actually when we decide to take those bottlenecks away for a little while in our thinking and say, what if? What if we couldn't fail? What would we actually spend time doing and why? Because then we can later actually add in those bottlenecks and work out how to get around them. But it's the thinking of maybe we actually could get around those bottlenecks that is important. And so I ask you, what would you do if you could never fail and why? Try and get detailed around that. One way to think about what really matters to you and how much it matters is to actually take away another constraint, which is financial. So imagine that you were given 50 billion pesos today. What would you do with it and why? And so a lot of my wealthy friends, would find that you could probably only spend reasonably about 1/20th of that on you and your family being like really lavish. You'd probably get to the point where you really struggle to think of the next thing to do for yourself or for them. And so most of those people then start to think about philanthropy and what they want to improve in the world. So if you were them, let's say that you spend a whole lot of money on yourself and now you're thinking about what else to do with it. What would you do and why? And let's talk about legacy. So in 100 years' time, what would you love to be remembered for? And maybe this is your family remembering. I certainly remember things that my grandparents did 100 years ago. But maybe it's also to be a historic figure, to have done something so impactful that you're really remembered by a much bigger group of people. What would you love to be remembered for? As you're thinking also about how you would feel if you actually achieved these goals, let's also think about aptitude, natural aptitude. What are you really good at? And so you might look at one of these goals and say, I can do that. I'm actually really good at it, but it takes a lot of hard work, which means that if I really work really hard for the rest of my life, I will impact 100 people. Or you might say, hey, there's something that I'm just really naturally good at. I don't have to put in that much effort. It might look like lots of work to others, but for me, it's just play. It's fun. I love doing it. Then you might be able to impact many-fold as many people. And so often focusing on something that you've just got a natural ability in is really clever. So what are you good at that just feels like play to you, but others find difficult? So now start to look back through the work. I hope that you're starting to see patterns. So you might be in one of two groups. Generally, there's one group that it's now really loud and clear what you want to focus on. Now you just need to distill it into a beautiful phrase. And so just go through what you've written the whole time. You might even have it already. What's really important? What's going to be the focus? And try and be as specific as you can with that. And for other people, it actually is still a lot of different items, lots of different ideas. And that says it would be great to spend some time really researching different areas and talking with people who are already working in those areas and really try to decide what is important to you. And at that point, you'll actually be able to start on the narrowing process and distilling. But I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to really pull this all together, try to formulate it into one really good phrase that really represents what you want to achieve in your life. Hopefully, it's something that at the end of your life, it will still be applicable. So if there were one phrase for all of what you want to do for the rest of your life, in terms of purposeful stuff, so this is aside from the normal, hopefully work and family and all of these other things. But if there were one achievement, what would it be? I hope that you either have or you're starting to find something that you're going to be really passionate about. And whether you're already someone who passionately goes through life and this is a distilling down to find the order in the chaos, or whether you're someone who needs to dust off the cobwebs and get back their mojo, this is something that we have seen work for thousands of people, help them really come alive, but also to have much better relationships because they can actually, with other people who've done this process, really start to see each other on a deeper level. Maybe it's even to get over some politics. Maybe, you know, it's someone that you have a conflict with and that you want to start to find common ground with them. And so this recording is going to be available on the website. You can feel free to use it with anyone that you wish. We always do it with teams and spend some time as a team actually talking through what our MTPs are. We also make sure that we're focusing in on how can we help each other to achieve our MTPs. And so why are we doing this now? Why are we doing this as part of the A-Game program? Well, whenever we start these voyages, so this is it's a 12-week sprint, to really come up with something that will be world-changing. We're trying to find things that can have an enormous impact, trying to do things 10 times better, not just a tiny bit better. And so where do we start? Well, we start with purpose. And so for the team, what's the purpose? How do we want to improve the lives of millions of people together? And so if you join us on one of those voyages, that will be the first part. And from that, as you can see, there's always a problem to be solved. That was why we started with the negative. What do you want to solve? And as well as the positive, what do we love to do? What are we good at? What would we do if we didn't have the bottlenecks? And it's my job and my colleagues' job to take away those bottlenecks and help you just fly. And so we then really start to talk to customers and find out from them what's important to them. So instead of jumping to conclusions about how to solve a big problem based on the status quo way of doing those things, we actually really try to get to the root causes and what's important to customers. And from there, we actually design and validate what could be a completely new solution. And so in many ways, we find things that are world firsts, but ones that are actually very reasonable in terms of difficulty to actually accomplish. The kinds of things that we say, oh, if we just take this and this and this and put it together from what we've seen around the world, it's a relatively easy thing to go and have a huge impact. So I hope that you really think about applying for A-Game and that this is the start of your journey. If it's not, I really hope that you're able to use this in many facets of your life and to really look around yourself and see problems that you want to solve. Don't just let them be sitting out there in the world. Go and do something about the things that frustrate you. Bring your community along with you and really have some fun with this. But most of all, believe that you're allowed to do this. Everyone is allowed to change the world and be extraordinary. So bring your whole talents to the rest of your life. Don't let them just sit there withering on the vine. Think big, be audacious, and really go for it. Go big. So let me now ask if there are questions.
Right. Thank you, Emily, for that wonderful session. And I do hope that our audience this afternoon really found solstice and learnings from this session. And as we mentioned earlier, this is the part that we will be entertaining questions. So just in case that you have clarifications or maybe some bottlenecks in terms of, creating your massive transformative purpose, this is the time that we can actually, write your questions. So maybe Emily, to start off, I think if you're just comfortable, we can kick off the question and answer by what is your personal MTP, by the way? Of course, we know that you have run this session millions and millions of times over. But care to share your MTP?
Yeah, for me, it's maximizing the net benefit of technology to the world. And for me, it's really important. I see that there are really good and bad uses of any particular technology. And some people will have nefarious uses, but so long as we can spend as much of our effort on the good, that will hopefully outweigh the bad. And so we can hopefully be optimistic about technology and how it can improve lives if we go about it that way.
Thank you, Emily. Another question that we have received offline is that what can we do if in case that we cannot really remove the worries or the potential blockers, to create our MTP? I think this question is coming from there's a lot of things happening in the world. There are a lot of noises, right? What are some tips or are the things that we can do, to remove them and forget about them?
So a lot of people really struggle because they start with where are we, and they really then focus on what's the next step. And it's actually taking away those steps and actually thinking, what world do we want to live in, let's say in 5 or 10 years' time, and then saying, okay, well, what would need to be true today to make that happen? Often when you do that, you find that you can sidestep a lot of the other sort of issues that are going on to really, find ways around things. But we often also just find creative lateral thinking is really helpful. So for instance, we worked with Procter & Gamble, which is a very large consumer goods company, and they wanted to improve invoicing, which is meant to be the really boring stuff. It turned into a very, very exciting piece of work, because usually what a company would do is say, okay, well, what are the 5 or 10 best invoicing systems in the world? What do we actually want to use out of them? And instead, if you say, okay, what are we trying to achieve? Why do we have anything like an invoicing system? You can do things like one of the team members who was on that team who said, okay, well, this is a fast-moving consumer goods business that has lots of boxes and warehouses. So why don't we put a 1 cent sensor in every box, a sensor reader in every facility, and if the box goes past the sensor reader, someone automatically gets paid on a smart contract. So they actually got rid of $100 million worth of invoicing per annum, and they did it in a matter of months. And, it was not a hard thing to do. It was that if they had thought about the status quo way of doing things, it would have been a real mess, and they would have gone up against all sorts of things. By the way, we, in my previous role, actually worked with a lot of very highly regulated industries. And so everyone would always start with, oh, yeah, but you don't mean us. Or, hey, we're not a digital company, therefore it's not us. And we would find ways around it every single time. So just really getting to the root causes, talking to customers, and just allowing yourself to have much more creative ideas about how to solve a problem is really important.
Thank you, Em. And I think, that process or that milestone, I think really started with defining what do you want to happen, right? What is the purpose? And I think what you have shared is the result of that exercise. So let me just read, Emily, a comment here from one of our attendees. We have a lot of those here in the Philippines, mottos and mantras which do not resonate to all levels of organization. Maybe this is not really a question, but to spin it off, maybe do you have any advices if in case that,
I do.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe you can share
you're so right. And so often it's not something that's lived every day, or it seems really like the management itself doesn't believe it. In fact, I have a friend who, I don't know how many people remember the company Enron that blew up enormously. It was a spectacular failure in California in the 90s. And I have a friend who bought all the signs from their offices that said integrity, relationships, responsibility, which obviously they didn't embody themselves. And so it has to be something that people live and that actually gets cascaded through the entire organization. And so it shouldn't, it should be people all sort of working out their personal MTPs and then seeing whether they actually relate to the company versions. And if they don't, it's probably not the right company for you to be in. But if you can actually find those linkages, then suddenly you feel like getting up and going to work in the morning. So it needs to be a living, breathing, something that drives people's passions right throughout the organization, or just throw them away.
Thank you, Emily. If I may use our language here, para sa mga nakikinig ngayong hapon dito, I think what Emily mentioned is that if it's something that resonates with you and you find linkages, ways to believe, right, in the motto or the mantra or the purpose of the organization, certain organization, I think the question, siguro sikat na commercial na para kanino ka bumabangon, will be answered, right? Because you have the purpose, you have the reason to wake up in the morning and do something that you love because you want to change the world, right? Another question, Em, if you still don't mind, what is a superficial and disconnected MTP, and how can we avoid this?
Yeah, another great question. So there are lots that are just way too general, and they're sort of motherhood statements like improve the world. Unless you can say exactly how and narrow it down, it's just really silly. And I know that that's the sentiment, but if it doesn't describe you, or it doesn't describe the company, and you can go, oh, it's that, that's why it is a linkage, then don't do it. But also it shouldn't be something that's about getting more clients, getting more money, getting more fame, fortune for yourself. It should be something that resonates internally, externally. If you're a company, for yourself, with anyone, that they're not going to go, oh, well, that's really self-serving. So it needs to be something that people go, that's really cool. How do I actually get involved? So if you can go up to someone on the street and say, this is what I'm about. So you probably don't want to say MTP because they won't understand what that is, but this is what I do. And they go, wow, that's cool. How do I get involved? Then that is a really good test of a fantastic MTP.
Thank you, Em. Another question here in the chat is that how can we be part of a big game? I think if I understood the question
A
correctly,
game.
A game. But we will be discussing that later, so please stay tuned and stay in the call. So another question, Em, is that Filipinos are creatures of habit, and in challenging that, we naturally end up succumbing to the status quo. Well, very deep. How can we drive change as individuals or search for like-minded folks?
Like many cultures around the world, this is a very hierarchical one. It's one where you can't possibly be smart and capable and a leader unless you're older and you've risen up through the ranks. That's something that we need to break down in a lot of cultures and say, okay, instead of having big tomes of books, huge books that tell us what we're not allowed to do as employees, we need to be saying, I trust you. Here's how we generate trust together. And then, so Isaac knows this, my only rule as a leader is to use your best judgment. Do what you would do if you owned the company. And so, we need to help people to get to that point where they feel like they've actually got the power. It's really up to them. And I think, there's all sorts of historical reasons why it's the case here in the Philippines. But we actually have to be able to say, I have something important to say, and I want to be able to share my ideas with people. And so if you're not getting that in your workplace, in your home, then find other people who share the same sort of MTP and work with them instead.
Thanks, Em. So at this point, Emily, allow me to read some comments from our chat box. Just sharing, there is an MTP I love here in the Philippines. Everyone. So Emily, just for your information, one is a generic, typical Pinoy name. Right? Everyone, I think there's a play of word here.
Yes.
Everyone can fly for a low-cost airline. And even as a customer, I resonate with this. Good observation. Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. Yes. It's great to be able to see the MTPs all around you.
Another comment here, M, and I think there's a question at the end. I love the idea of being allowed to change the world. There will always be folks who tell you that that's not your job, though. and believe people should stay in their own lane. What's the best way to get more people to want to adopt the mindset that they too are allowed to advocate for change? Good question.
Absolutely. And if they're trying to tell you what your job in life, and I mean your actual life is, well, that's not their role. The only person who can tell you what your life is about is you. And so maybe it's someone who's saying no in the workplace. And then the question is, well, do you actually want low engagement from your staff because they can't see why, there's a focus on what you're doing? In fact, most companies, when you ask people, why do you exist as a company? They say, oh, well, we're a telco, we provide telecommunications to people or something like that, as opposed to, no, how do we want to actually improve people's lives? And I know I just said something generic, but is it we want to be able to connect people with their loved ones? We want to be able to speed up processes for people. And so you've got to just reframe things. It doesn't necessarily mean that you go to someone every single time who might be a naysayer and say, this is the end goal, but it's those little things of, hey, what's the return on investment? What do you gain out of it? And start to throw in those kinds of little ideas. And eventually you've got them sort of attracted to an MTP, but also just saying to some of your other peers who might be open to it, would you like to do this process? It tends to have a sort of self-fulfilling momentum to it. So I would start there as well.
Thank you, Em. And I think that's another usage of the MTP, right? To spark things off and use your voice to actually ask and suggest. I hate to break this, but we are actually conscious of the time, but we will ask one last question, Emily, if that's okay with you.
Yes.
All right. So the last question for this afternoon is that when do you know that you should conduct MTP in an organization? And if yes, how do you start conducting it? Do you have any tips or comments about that?
Okay, so I think yesterday, as in it's never too late, and every company really should have one. So I'm pretty black and white on that one. And how do you start conducting it? Well, first of all, the video from this can be used, and all you do is adapt, instead of a personal one, the business one, and it's really easy to do that. In fact, all of the questions we use fairly interchangeably. There's literally just a presentation that we have that is slightly different wording for business. So feel free to use this. Or there are some other resources that are online from various other groups, but it's really actually much easier than you would expect once you start to ask people about what really matters to them. So I would say be bold, be audacious, and just get going on it.
Thank you. And I do hope for those organizations or even at their homes, right? You start thinking of your MTP, and we assure you that it will greatly change your life and the way you think. All right. So that formally concludes our Q&A. But before we let you go, Emily, do you have any parting words or last tips, or maybe invite them to our A game before we, actually discuss the A game to our audience? Go ahead.
I want to welcome everyone to apply for the A game and to be part of the voyages that we're on, where we can really try and use our sense of purpose to improve the lives of millions of people. So I really hope to see you in the rounds of competition that we're doing and on the A game teams. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. And again, let's give a virtual round of applause for Emily, if you can do that. Thank you so much, Em. And at this point, allow me to use the remaining 15 minutes to just quickly share with you what is this A game that we're talking about earlier at the start of the program, and to what Emily mentioned a while ago. So if you want to know more information, allow me to share this. All right. So the Avoid This A game actually is a competition to find innovative individuals who are passionate about honing their skills to build a better future with the power of their ideas, right? As we mentioned earlier, and as Emily mentioned earlier, that we have this program in our company that we call Voyage. It's a 12-week program where we actually guide these individuals to develop their ideas, right? So if you are that person that you want to hone and bring your ideas into life because you feel and you believe that you can change the world, Especially now in this session, we do hope that you have realized your MTP already. And from that massive transformative purpose, you will now see and think, hmm, this is the purpose. This is what I want to do in my life. These are the problems that I want to solve. So connecting that with this session, and when you have actually realized that you already have an MTP, maybe it's another step that you can actually do is to join the A game, right? So the process is that when you apply and you pass our assessments and interviews, you will be offered an opportunity to join our Voyage program, the 12-week program that we are referring to. So how to join? What's the journey? So 3 easy steps. Number one, prepare all your application requirements. So by the way, you can see all the requirements on our LinkedIn pages, our Instagram account, Avoid These Careers, and of course in our on our Facebook pages, right? So you just need to submit your application requirements to us, and the links are also provided in the materials that we have uploaded and on social medias. And as we mentioned, the shortlisted candidates will be invited to a digital interview with the Avoidance Transformation Office for evaluation. And after that, if you submit all your applications, you pass the interviews, we will be selecting at the very least 20 finalists that we will be inviting over in BGC to prepare and do one final face-to-face pitch. And from there, we will be selecting the winners of the A Game Challenge Day, as we call it. And those people will be offered an opportunity to join the Voyage program. So if you want to know more about the program, we will be just flashing this for a while. So if you want to know more and actually apply, please scan this QR code, especially for those who are not yet familiar or haven't submitted their applications. Please do so. Scan this QR code. You will be redirected into a microsite, and the application link or form can also be found in that microsite. So please feel free to submit your applications. By the way, you just need to send your CV or resume, and then also a short, very, very short video to answer the question if there are any problem or problems in the Philippines that you want to solve. What is that and how? Very simple, right? So just a quick video, 1 to 1 minute, 1 minute to 130 seconds, 1 and 30 seconds video will suffice for this requirement. And after that, you will be receiving an invitation for an interview, and then we will take it from there. Gentle reminder that the deadline will be on March 10th at 5 p.m. So you still have time to prepare and think and submit your applications to us. We are very, very excited to work with you. So we do hope that you consider this invitation and join our A game and eventually to be part of our Voyage program and the Avoidees Group. Sorry, Emily, just to share, I think someone shared their MTP out of this exercise, bridging the gap for a faster Filipino mobility. Wow.
It's a fantastic one, and one that I'm passionate about too. So I hope we get to find ways to collaborate.
Thank you. And if in case, our doors are always open if you have any questions, but we still have time. So if you have questions about the A game, please feel free to chat it in the chat box if in case. So I think I have also seen names who have actually applied for the A game. So thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. We also assure you that this session will greatly help you with your application process. And again, to those people who just tuned in or not yet familiar with this program, we still have until Friday to check out our materials, our communication materials, and to know more about this program. And again, we invite you to apply if you want to change the world with the power of your ideas. I think we don't have any questions. Going once, going twice. Okay, if that's the case, once again, on behalf of the Avoidance Group and the Avoidance Academy, together with the Office of the Chief Transformation Officer, we greatly thank you for spending your time with us this afternoon. And we do hope that after this session, you get to realize and create your massive transformative purpose. And lastly, we invite you to apply to our A game because we were excited to work with you and change the world together. Thank you so much. Maraming salamat po, and we will see you in our next session. Thank you so much and have a nice day ahead.